Hello, good evening. So nice to be with all of you tonight. This is Vrajalila, and we have the Inter-IFAS team with us tonight, Kishore Rani and Leela Devidasi and Anna. I'm sure Anna is here somewhere. And we are joined tonight to share some memories of Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. So tonight we will dive right in with a memory of him back in around 2000. So this is the year 2000. And around that time, believe it or not, there was a big crisis in America. I don't think it was worldwide like this one, but it was in America. And it was called Y2K. And something I want to share about Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj that it was always intriguing to me that he was very, very much aware of catastrophic situations that would happen on the planet. He would always prepare us for things like that. And he would always speak about those kinds of, he would have themes on things that would happen in the world. He would read about different prophetic things that would happen. And somehow that was a part of the way that he practiced his Krishna consciousness. He was very Krishna conscious at the same time. He was very aware of the different disasters, crises, catastrophes that would happen on the planet. So this is 2000, and we are now in the midst of the Institute for Applied Spiritual Technology. Many, many people are coming. Many people want to learn about Krishna consciousness from Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. We're getting many professional people and lots of students. And it was during that time that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj decided that he would create what we called at that time a cell formation. So it was called the cell formations. And what that was is he would ask me to call some of the people that were more involved with the Institute at that time. They were coming a lot more often, and they were expressing some interest in the Institute. And so he requested me once to bring everyone together, kind of like a town hall meeting, something like that. And then after I called everyone and all these different people showed up, he started with this first phase of introducing that they need to become aware that material world means disasters and catastrophes. And I remember that so clearly because at that time, nobody wanted to hear anything like that. Everybody was like, that was 2000. Nobody's thinking about stuff like that so much, and these professionals, they're really immersed in thinking that, life, the way they know it is the all in all, And so although they're spiritual seekers, however, they weren't seeking in any way thinking, oh, there might be something wrong, that something might go wrong on the planet. They weren't thinking like that so much. However, in that first phase, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj brought this to their awareness, and he would meet for several weeks with people, with these different people that would come, and he would speak only about the fact that things would be happening on the planet. They need to be prepared for it, that spiritual life means to, become austere, and that spiritual life means that one should understand that the body, will need to face different kinds of austerities, and that one has to face the austerities that will be presented by the physical body, and it was disturb the mind. And he would just like hype. He was such like a person that would like get people's attention. And then after he did that for a few weeks, then he introduced the second phase. And the second phase of this program was to create these different cells. And Ekavira Prabhu he and another devotee named Parikshit, they were, at that time, his name wasn't Parikshit. I can't remember his name now, but he was just visiting the institute. And Ekavira, I think, was Eric. He was also just visiting the institute. So they're all like new, and they're all like professionals, these young, upcoming professionals in Washington, D.C. And so here now, the second phase, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he organized the cells. And so there were these different cells, and he assigned different leaders for each cell. And so Ekavira and Parikshit, they were the organizers of these cells. So every week now, so this is in the second phase, every week these cells would come together and meet, and they would discuss, what they had done the week before in preparation for what Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was helping them to understand, that there would be some huge catastrophe that would be happening. So now, as he was doing that, the same time, as for some reason or other during that same time, this big overwhelming propaganda happened in the United States about Y2K. I can't even remember like what Y2K was, but it was something like, some disaster, some big catastrophe that was going to happen on the planet, and you needed to, conserve and, So somehow, though, this big catastrophe was leading right into this mood that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was trying to, offer these professionals to accept. So when they started hearing all this in the media, they became much more serious. And so Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj used this to help them to focus on their spiritual life. And so the cells that were formed were the water cell. Can you hold on once? Did I leave it open? Yes, sorry. Okay, So here's Ekavira, he's coming back in. So those cells that were formed at that time were 9 different cells, which means we had 9 different leaders that were responsible for every week bringing back some information about what they did. And so there was, of course, the spiritual cell, and I was a part of that with Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. And my service was to help to keep a focus on our spiritual life, which I'm so grateful, because here we are, that was in 2000, and here we are to 2020, and I'm, by his grace, still trying to keep a focus on our spiritual life. So that was one of the cells. And then another cell was the mental health cell. And in that cell, there were psychologists and social workers, because as I said, he was attracting so many professionals. So we had many psychologists, we had many social workers, we had many counselors, we had all kinds of professionals. And here's a chair for me. I move right over, right here. And so Ekavira is joining me. He had to do some things outside, sorry. And so that mental health cell was responsible for research and for understanding, how people were being affected by this huge catastrophe that was happening. And then there was the food cell. And I let Ekavira talk about these cells, because he actually was the coordinator of the cells. Him and Parikshit Prabhu, they were both responsible for making sure that every week something was being done with these cells. So maybe you can talk about the different cells and what the responsibilities were for those.
Okay. I heard you speaking about water.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was water, mental health.
You come over a little bit more.
Water, mental health, food, shelter, protection or security, clothing, spiritual health,
Electricity.
power, which included electricity. What else was there? Am I forgetting something?
There were 9 cells. I remember that. I remember because, every week we would have, in the Institute, we would have all these groups of people gathered together in their little groups, right? And they would be discussing what they had done, and they would all need to report back to Ekavira and Parikshit. And ultimately, we would all report back to Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, what we were all doing. I was doing courses at the time, spiritual courses. And so you want to talk a little bit about—
the security cell. I remember that was led by Daruka Prabhu, and they were a group of martial artists. So they would actually come, and they trained. And then at a certain point, when we made the decision, we were actually in Gita Nagari at the time. After they were going through their process, we moved to Gita Nagari, and they came and scoped out the whole property, and started looking at the points of entry, and how to actually protect the farm. And anyway, it was so it was so much. Then there was a water cell that was led by Thunder.
I just want to share one thing here, because the martial artists, all the security guys, they were so into it, because I think it's something that they had been training, for a long time, and they didn't know what to do. They just was training and training and training. And now finally, it's like a person that's maybe trained in a police academy or something, and then you got to get out on the street. So finally, they have all this martial arts training and all these different security things that they've learned. And now they get a chance to we're finally going to use it. So that was Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj's expertise in engaging people according to their propensities. He knew not everybody was just going to sit down and read, spiritual books. Yeah.
And so, they also, it was security and communications, because then they set up this was before the cell phone era. So we had walkie-talkies, and that's how we communicated whenever we, even when we moved traveling. We'd have walkie-talkies between the different vehicles and communicate in that way. Clothing, that was Kamadaki and Kartamisha, and they had their own manual sewing machines, foot-operated sewing machines, non-electric. And then they started planning to have sheep. We got sheep here at Gita Nagari so that they could actually utilize the wool. But prior to coming to Gita Nagari, they were getting different forms of cloth, and they were having sewing lessons, showing the devotees how to actually sew certain things. Sold a lot of bead bags at that point.
Yeah, we had tons of bead bags. I remember that. Yeah.
Water, Thunder was in charge of water, and he had invested in a well drilling machine. And we came here, we drilled a little shallow well here in Gita Nagari after some time. But then he would provide education about how to actually get good water, even in the cities. That's when we started investing in the British Berkey water filters. They were non-electric, which are very good to use at this point in time, as a matter of fact.
Actually, I think Leela has one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Silver impregnated filters. Those were special. Then you had your physical health. We had Madhvacharya Prabhu. He was a doctor, and who was the other doctor? It was someone else who was a doctor. Anyway, there was Madhvacharya.
There's a few doctors.
Was the head of that.
Oh, yeah. The other person was a Sai Baba disciple. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, these people were coming from different paths, and they would come to the Institute, and the Institute was open to everyone. Although many of them knew after some time that we were bhakti yogis, they weren't intimidated or affected, or we weren't intimidated or affected. We just, made ourselves available to help people in general. And so these people came, and we had such loving exchanges, and many of them actually, became devotees of Krishna. And many of them came to live in Gitanagari after some time from being part of these cells. Chintamani, and Jagana Pandit, who are the leaders, and two of the leaders in the Grihastha Vision team, that's when they moved to Gitanagari. Their children were born, just prior to them moving to Gitanagari. Their children were raised here on the farm. So the reason Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj developed these cells was to prepare people for a more simple way of approaching life. That was always, always, as far as I can remember, that was always his mood, to get us to understand simplicity goes together with Krishna, with spirituality. You can't separate. You can't have spirituality without simplicity. And so this was the mood. And so many of our devotees now are fully prepared for what's happening in the world, consciousness wise, because we were prepared. We were prepared for this.
And I remember after we went through years of preparation, being in Washington, D.C., establishing the different groups and meeting and organizing. And then after we moved to Gitanagari and continuing to actually set up things here in Gitanagari, I remember having a conversation, and it was with Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, and it was in regards to shelter. And I said, Guru Maharaj, living in these houses, as large as they are, with electricity and everything, coming off the grid or being self-sufficient is actually a joke. And he started laughing. And he said, so you finally realized, he said, actually, we always look for ways in which we can encourage the devotees and engage them in service to Krishna and to simplify their lives. All of these different things were actually done to actually help devotees to meditate on simplifying their lives. And in most cases, you'll find that most devotees won't live simply unless they're forced to. Mm. And so that was something that he was using this Y2K thing to help us all to just, make a paradigm, have a paradigm shift.
Yeah.
And so he expressed there's always going to be calamities that take place on the planet. There's always going to be those things. The main thing is that we try to utilize whatever we can in Krishna service and try to help focus devotees on what's most important, and that's spiritual development, which simplicity helps in that regard, and relationships.
Yeah.
And that was the main thing in regards to all of these different groups. He said, you'll find that, none of your groups are independent. You'll find that as you start working and trying to manifest things, you'll find that you're interdependent. Mm-hmm. You rely on other persons and other groups and how they have overlaps. And that's the most important thing in all of this, is to understand our relationships.
So thank you very much. We're going to read something from one of the books that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj wrote during that time. It is called Spiritual Warrior 3, and it's solace for the heart in difficult times, because he actually knew that difficult times would come. And if you get this book, you'll be amazed at some of the things that he's saying in this book, which was written around 2000, that is so relevant today. Actually, I've been sending quotes out every day from this book for the last few days, because I'm just amazed to see that, not amazed, because I know from the time I met Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he was always so focused on mind, body, and soul. It was always like, you got to take care of your mind, you got to take care of your body. And ultimately, this is also that we can get focused on our souls. And so he trained us in this way, and he trained us to do this by developing relationships with others, with other people, not just devotees of Krishna, but with all people. He was so much wanting that humanity, could have a mood of seeing each person as their brother and their sister. And I recently saw a recording of Radhanath, His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj, and it was done in England. It was done by a famous person interviewing him. It's on the London Reel, I think that's what it's called. And this person was asking Maharaj, he says, what troubles you at night? What bothers you at night? What makes you not like able to sleep? And he said, his answer was so simple yet so profound. He said, what makes me not able to sleep is that people just don't care for each other. They don't get it. They don't get it. And so that's the mood of all these great teachers that have come. Certainly that was the mood that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj trained us with. And so Ekavira is going to share a little something from this book, Solace for the Heart in Difficult Times. So just something very short. Very short.
I'm going to read something. Oh, short.
Yeah, very short from the book.
This is in regards to many of the different challenges in society that people go through. There is a apparent cause, and then there is a cause behind the apparent cause.
Okay.
Meaning something that we may not see. Okay.
Head over. Okay. So they can see. Yeah. There you go.
This particular section is what is behind it all. And he's expressing about material agenda, how it works. For example, imagine that I have gained control of all your property so gradually that you have hardly noticed it. Then imagine that I gave you an allowance of money, offering you unlimited opportunity to spend these funds at any store you choose, all of which belong to me now. Suppose further that I create so many stresses for you that you are eager to purchase all the diversions that I am marketing to you. The catch, of course, is that any money you spend will go right into my pocket. This is despite the fact that everything you buy has actually come from property that originally belonged to you, as much as it does now to me. In other words, all of the merchandise I'm selling to you comes from assets to which you should and would have free access, except for the fact that I have illegally claimed all of it for myself. Actually, I have only given you money so that you can boost my income. I have only given you the appearance of freedom so that you will give this money to me more willingly. Slave masters can have any number of profit motives and agendas. However, interestingly enough, today's new breed of slave masters is different from any type who came before, because the modern slave masters' objectives are primarily recreation. This new type of slave master is so utterly wealthy that the enslavement of others often occurs only for sport and recreation. When the money game gets boring, these people have to find other means of stimulation because they cannot possibly spend all the money they have amassed. The next challenge for them becomes gaining power, control, and manipulation. That is why some of the rich and super rich are among the most perverted people on the planet. Slaves become a means by which the slave masters can exert their manipulation and control. For example, one of the goals of today's slave masters is to find ways to employ cheap or free labor with which they can construct canals, roadways, railroad systems, factories, and other major instruments of supremacy and control. They also seek to dominate the political and economic arenas.
So this was some of the areas where Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj would focus to help people in the world, to give them some awareness about things that were going on in the world that they may not have been aware of. And so we want to close this session with something from this very dear devotee friend that we love very much. Her name is Achyuta Devidasi. And I know that people are really in despair out here today. And I know people are, kind of worried, maybe having some fear, some concerns. And so I just want to share this poem because I know this poem would be in the mood of Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. Tell me your sorrows, your hopes, and your dreams. Tell me your fears, your triumphs, and your hurdles. Tell me, and I will combine all those and string a lovely garland to drape around the strong arms of the beloved. In other words, pray often, sincerely, heartbreakingly, realistically, just pray. Thank you very much. We're very grateful to have been on the program with you tonight, and we will see you again next Tuesday, prayerfully, to bring more from His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hari Hari, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.